Hi, I'm John Foran. I teach sociology and environmental studies at UC Santa Barbara. And in view of the moment that we're living through, this climate crisis, all encompassing and so threatening, I feel that it's time to speak some truth with each other. So let's see how much I can channel in the next 15 minutes or so, and how much you want to engage with it afterwards. I'm a scholar of social movements, particularly the revolutions of the 20th century and the newer movements for radical social change in this century, such as Occupy and the Arab Spring and the global justice movement. And my life and my work changed direction in 2009 when I had the opportunity to attend the UN Climate Summit COP15 in Copenhagen. And there I was part of the Alternative Klima Forum, which was a 2-week-long alternative summit held by the global climate justice movement. And there I heard people like Bill McKibben and Mohammed Nasheed, the president of the Maldives, Naomi Klein, and others speak about the issue of the day, the climate crisis and the failure of the UN climate process, negotiating process, to arrive at a fair, binding climate treaty. So in 2010, I started to change the direction of my teaching and my research, and I introduced a number of new classes, starting with Earth in Crisis, in which students get an overview of the situation and role play a UN climate summit. And this course is taught in the fall. And for 5 years, I attended these summits right after the role play of the students, where I could Skype back. In those days, it was Skype, from the UN Climate Summit that they had just role played. I also teach a course called Climate Justice and a course called Activism, which look at the origins, the makeup, the strategies, the achievements and limitations of climate justice movements and their potential. Because I believe that given the state of the crisis and given the lack of effective confronting of the crisis by states and by other powerful economic and political actors, it's really going to take the formation, the creation, the co-creation of the greatest social movement in the history of the world in order to redirect our efforts in this critical time in the age of the Anthropocene. My favorite class that I teach is called The World in 2050, Sustainable Development and Its Alternatives. And in that, there's usually a practical class project, which recently has taken the form of involving engaging students in the community adjacent to the university. And I'll speak about that a little later. In light of the times that we're now obliged to live through, I would suggest the following as guiding principles: that we connect teaching with research and activism within the global climate justice movement. That we realize that as teachers, we now need to become activists, whether that means publishing our work in open access format, addressing the general public, and speaking to the concerns, the real existential issues of our students, rather than just speaking to a handful of academics in our specialized fields. I believe that care for our current and future students demands this of us and is now a calling higher than academia itself. One of the projects I'm involved in is called the UC-CSU Knowledge Action Network. And that is a collaboration of faculty from across the disciplines, both in the University of California system and the California State University system. This year, we're engaged in creating a digital platform for teachers and for their students around issues of climate change or climate crisis, climate justice, and critical sustainability. And we hope to launch this website in the fall of 2019. And we hope that you will find it useful and contribute to it as it grows. So the way that this website is organized is according to each scholar's passion within those broad topics. And I should say there are 13, 14 of us working on this. So each of us is taking on some part of this vast puzzle, the interconnected elements of the climate crisis. For me, given my expertise, I've worked on the topic of the climate justice movement itself, and a second related topic called systemic alternatives. And one thing that I think is important for our students, and this has always been important in sociology, is that our students, even as they come to better understand the problems of the world and read and learn and analyze those problems, also have the opportunity to creatively engage with possible solutions or alternatives to the way things are. If you don't do this, you will demoralize your students, just as you're introducing them to a field like sociology or environmental studies. And therefore, I've always taught my classes that way, with a very quick overview of the climate crisis. We read a little book by Danny Chivers called The No-Nonsense Guide to Climate Change. And then we plunge immediately into what people are doing around the world to confront it. And we look at the nature of the climate justice movement. Usually, as I say, there's a project that involves a study of particular organizations, a comparison of strategies or tactics, and occasionally participant observation in local climate justice movements. So I think that because teaching and studying climate change, in fact, the climate crisis, can understandably provoke anxiety, it's indispensable to emphasize the climate justice movements in my courses for the sheer sense of empowerment, capacity, courage, and excitement this generates among students. And for this reason, I believe that familiarity with the climate justice movement should be in all scholars and students who are interested in climate change in their toolkits. Equally important, in addition to studying or showing how today's powerful intersectional climate justice movements are helping to halt and reverse the process of fossil fuel and industrial agriculture-based capitalism, our students need to discover and explore the many alternatives that exist for a different way of life. One way to think about this that comes from my research on revolutions is to note that no revolution, no movement for deep social transformation has ever succeeded without the development and the spread of what we might call political cultures of opposition and resistance. In other words, ordinary people have to have analyses to make sense of the world around them, what their problems are, what the problems of the world are. And they need to share and co-create a culture of opposition to the wrongs and the injustices, and in our case, the threats to our way of life posed by the climate crisis. By the same token, we might think in terms of political cultures of creation as people's visions of some future that's better, or some way in which something to shoot for, to aim at in their political engagements. And this is where both the climate justice movement and systemic alternatives come together, because it's important to both stop the direction that we're headed in and set out in another. Among the systemic alternatives that we usually look at in the world in 2050 are the transition town movement and the eco-village movement, the ideas of eco-socialism or intersectional eco-socialism, that is eco-socialism and ecofeminism, the Latin American cosmovision, indigenous cosmovisions of buen vivir, living better instead of living with more, and the rights of Mother Earth, along with other alternatives. These are often indigenous in origin from the global south, and the northern concept and movement for degrowth, the idea that we have to restructure our economies, we have to reduce the level of consumption and resource extraction and usage that are driving the climate crisis. I'm going to close by returning to the question of engaging students in the community, because this is a place also where both the climate justice movement and systemic alternatives can come to life on a local level. Here, the University of California at Santa Barbara is adjacent to a 20,000 people who live in a square mile on the Pacific Ocean. And that town is called Isla Vista. A year or so ago, a number of students came together to do something about the endemic problems of Isla Vista, including the expense of renting from landlords who crowd students into apartments that are often substandard and charge ridiculous rents for them, including ideas about composting and recycling, including the notion of community gardening, farmers market, and food justice to combat food insecurity, and in general creating a culture and a budding economy that are circular and self-generated and reinforce each other going forward. So it's a huge task. The notion is that they might be able to turn their own community into an eco-village in the next 8 to 10 years. And so this project is called Eco Vista. And it's enormously exciting both for students and for myself to go into the community and to test ideas and to try and make things happen, and then to analyze the experience, what works, what doesn't work, and to leave a legacy for students that will come after them, a set of ideas, of contacts, of successful experiments that are ongoing, and in this way to really make an impact, a direct impact on the world in which they live, with the idea that if they succeed to the degree that they can with this, this could become a model for students at other universities or other schools, high schools around the country, to try to do the same wherever they are. So I'm going to show you a picture of what we might call the political culture of creation that is Isla Vista. This was given to me actually 2 days ago by a student, an artist, as not even a class project. This was just something that he wanted to contribute to the realization of Eco Vista. And then we made t-shirts by silk screening this beautiful image onto the back of reused clothing. So I'll close by saying that the goal of the UC-CSU Knowledge Action Network and the digital platform that will be launched in the fall of 2019 is to cultivate network building among college-level teachers and students in particular, but equally so to activists, creative workers in all of the arts, media, and communication folks, and you. We invite your participation. I hope that some of you will get involved in the Q&A for this session if you want to comment or contribute to this process. Let's join efforts to enhance what each of us is doing and could do in the classrooms, communities, and organizations to which we belong. System change, not climate change. Climate justice now.